Welcome, everyone, to the First Name Basis podcast. This is where we chat with our special guests and our network innovators about what they're actually doing. And we talk about today's topic. This is an informal conversation where we actually be authentic with each other. Today, I got with me Eric Schvimmer. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right.
You got it.
Otherwise, I've been butchering it for years. But I got Eric with me, who is the EVP of Technology and CTO of the Bloomberg Industry Group. So, Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheetal, for having me on.
I wanted to first start off with our listeners to get to know you a little better. It's always an interesting story that comes up with our guests who come up on the podcast about how they got to where they are. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Well, everybody would love to say, hey, it's based on skill and brain power and everything else. But the reality is most everything in life is based on luck.
Right.
And so
you got to work hard to make your luck.
Yeah, but there's an old saying: the harder you work, the luckier you get too, right?
Exactly.
But I think
it's funny you talk about luck, and because it's Friday afternoon, I forgot to mention I put the Bellagio fountains behind me here.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even realize that metaphor, but yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, I guess to answer that question, how did I get where I was? So, first bit of luck, and I'll try not to bore you all to death and take you down a real long road, but back in the Paleontonic age when I was going to college, I was originally going to school to be a meteorologist.
Mm-hmm.
I got there, and at the end of the first year, they canceled the program. And
Okay.
I'm like, okay, time to figure out plan B.
Right.
So I started looking through back then.
Just on that, what made you get so interested to be a meteorologist?
Because actually, and I'm still to this day, the Weather Channel was one of the best inventions in its time. The Weather Channel app, and now even stuff like Weather Underground and My Radar and things like that. I'm still like thrilled. There's a science aspect to it, and then there's this whole piece of the unknown and trying to put it all together that kind of was cool.
Right.
And yeah, we could spend the whole hour talking about what's going on in meteorological circles.
Well, I mean, it's awesome to see how like so many AI models actually use weather data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to do that, and I started looking through the college course catalog. That tells you how long ago it was. And I'm like, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up here? At least, how am I going to get out of here? And so I saw this thing called, what at the time was called Management Information Systems degree. And I'm like, yeah, that looks kind of cool. Let's try that out. So I did that.
Nobody but you.
Right. And so, what it was somewhat unique in the time. It was sort of a cross between a CS degree and a business degree. So you took programming courses in languages that we will not talk about right now.
Was COBOL one of them?
Yeah, actually, I could get a job here in the state of New Jersey. I hear they need help with their employment system. But yeah, COBOL was one, and Fortran was another. All those nasty languages you don't really want to hear about anymore.
It's funny how many of them are still running and operating some of the largest enterprises in the world. Right?
I mean, yeah, I hate to admit it, but yes, I know of a lot of places that are using it. So learned all those languages, but also more importantly, and what I've found has really helped me throughout my career is understanding the business aspect of what we're doing, and why you're doing these things for, and being able to read a basic financial statement, which, believe me, I spend way too much time doing now, but it serves you well. So basic finance principles. So that's serendipitous moment number one. I left school, joined a startup firm at that time, and this will resonate with everybody, I think, which was called MCI.
Sure.
And that was back when it was a small company and was going after the big Goliath, AT&T. Did that for a few years, then went and worked for a government contractor as a developer, and learned a lot there. And that was probably my first taste of being a team lead / manager. But I got pretty frustrated because, quite frankly, the pace of dealing with government clients was just not what I was used to or wanted at that time of my life. Sure. Then got an opportunity to go work at the Washington Post as a developer. So went over there, started working on not the fancy stuff at first, but the circulation systems, how the paper got to your door. Did some development there, worked on that stuff. And then eventually this wild new technology called local area networks, wide area networks was all coming into being about then. And so I went into a role that had me work with our affiliate companies, which at the time we owned Newsweek, we owned half of the International Herald Tribune. And what my boss had discovered at the time was that all of these properties were making use of printing facilities in the very same cities at different times. And so we set up a wide area network using time division multiplexing so that we could take the same physical leased lines, again, tells you a little bit about where we were, which were very expensive at the time, and multiplex them together. So that was kind of cool. We did that, implemented all sorts of this brand new wild software as a service product for our human resources product called PeopleSoft.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's this is almost like going to the Computer History Museum. I'll speed it up a little bit.
No. It's actually really interesting.
And then and then around, what was it, 1995? Oh God. And Don Graham has a lot of great attributes, and one of his greatest attributes, he was the owner of the Washington Post at the time, and was up until he sold it to Jeff Bezos. Was very innovative in looking forward, and he saw what was going on in the digital landscape and created a division separate from the main part of the company to go off and explore digital opportunities, so it wouldn't be encumbered by the mainline business.
Is that what became WAPO Labs?
That's probably a newer incarnation of it.
Sure.
It started off as a company called Digital Inc., then later became WashingtonPost.com.
What an awesome company name, Digital Inc.
Yep, yeah. INK. So they started off with producing CDs and things like that. And the failed attempt I forgot what was the name of that platform that it was running on. But then we said, oh, that's not going to work out too well. Then we went online with what was a competitor of AOL, the AT&T online network.
Sure.
And then we actually really did something that was kind of cool, which was launched on the internet. And there was this all happened right around the time of the Olympics in 1996. A bunch of companies launched. Yeah.
No,
Atlanta.
Atlanta, baby. Atlanta. Yeah, it was Atlanta.
Yeah. So we all launched right around that summer online and the internet. And so I went over to join that company. Started off, ironically, running infrastructure and operations, which when I first started doing that, I knew nothing about it.
Right.
But learned, and it was pretty valuable, and learned how to scale things. We learned that vertical scaling didn't work too well. We learned that real quick the hard way.
Sure.
And then looked at more horizontal architectures and then hosted data centers and all that wild stuff. Anyhow, so we did that. And then I was director of infrastructure and operations. And then at the time, the guy who was running the organization as the CTO left. And they looked around and said, why don't you go try that out for a little while.
Sure.
And it was a little closer to what I actually cared about, more passionate about development and that fun stuff. So did that up until like 2006. So I was the VP of engineering for WashingtonPost.com until 2006. So all sorts of war stories there. I guess unfortunately, the one that sticks out the most to me.
That's a tough period too, because that's when it's like, hey, you're giving out all this content for free online. More and more people are online, but the majority of your business is still paper-based, right?
Yeah. So this one might get me sued, but the reason that the internet was free back then,
completely off the cuff. So I like.
So, everybody was trying to actually launch with a subscription model back then, but the challenge was nobody could find, or very few companies were able to build the paywall infrastructure needed to do that and support it at scale. We used a package as well as the New York Times so that I don't get sued. I will leave the company's name out of it. And unfortunately, we went and started getting ready to launch with it, and didn't work. So, everybody said this is how the internet became free in some ways. So it was July. Everybody was in a rush to get out there, and they just said, "Screw it, it's all content. We'll just launch."
Yep.
And with the exception of the Wall Street Journal, who's always been ahead of the game on the subscription model, they figured out how to get it out there. God bless them. So anyhow, that's how that all happened. So the other memorable event is unfortunately a very tragic event, and that would have been 9/11. Sure. And I can recall, so the story starts in a very sad way. Probably 4 or 5 months ahead of the event, a person by the name of Danny Lewin came into my office. Danny Lewin was one of the founders of Akamai, and turned out to have been on one of those planes that was taken over by the terrorists. So he came into my office, him and Tom Layton, and pitched this new product called Akamai, content caching, to offload and CDN networks. And they're like, that sounds like a great idea. We're going to sign up. And we weren't the first, but we were amongst like maybe their first 10 customers.
Sure.
Unfortunately,
the pioneer workload for them.
Yeah. And unfortunately, where we found out that it really worked was an event that ultimately led to Danny's demise, was that event. And that was just a crazy day. But those were the sort of the highlights. But we were one of the few sites that stayed up because of the technology that Danny and Tom Layton developed, Akamai. And now
so widely used. Now it's used everywhere. It's just
everybody uses CDNs are a common thing.
It's the standard. Yeah.
Again, trip down memory lane. So anyhow, I did that till 2006. Decided it's time to do something else. Went out and formed my own company and did some digital quote consulting. What that meant was try to figure out what the next thing is. Okay. And I did some.
You're knocking me. I do this for a living.
Well, for me, it was me only. I'm not as
fair enough.
I was never as quite what's the right way to say it? Smart or industrious enough to build it into a real company. So I went out and did that, and took me to some organizations overseas in Europe. That was kind of good, but it also took me to an organization in Atlanta. That was a search engine optimization, search engine marketing organization that later got acquired by Dentsu. And what that made me really realize was just the immense scale of the internet. And we had two different things that we worked on there. And it was AI before the word AI really got coined.
Yeah.
And so it was being able to do predictive algorithms of sorts on where you should bid based on keywords. And by the way, the brains behind this was a ex-hedge fund trader who developed the algo. And it was, in some cases to get the real, to get the better bang for the buck, you're better off bidding for spot 3 or 4 on the page than spot 1. And then the other piece, it had just tremendous scale because we had to capture all the clicks to make sure we understood the referrals. And that was one of the biggest load challenges that I've ever dealt with. Is just being able to handle that immense amount of load. And we made the mistake of trying to do that in a SQL database, and it also taught me the value of decoupling pieces of architecture. I mean, I already knew it from my time at Post.com, but we had to get on an accelerated program because everything was a monolith system. And when you don't want your capture system to overwhelm your processing system and all that other fun stuff, basic shit. Anyway. Whoops, I probably shouldn't use that word on that.
No, it's all effing good. If you notice, if you go to our podcast, you'll see a lot of them have the explicit E beside them. It's all good.
Yeah.
You're fitting right in. You're fitting right in, Eric. Don't worry.
Good friend of mine took over as CTO over at AOL and convinced me to come in and help them transform from what was a client company to a client-based company, the AOL client, you got mail, to an online company. And that was pretty incredible in a lot of ways. It was probably my first real exposure to the true Agile methodologies, as we were really trying to teach people to think more iteratively as opposed to Big Bang. It was also a transformation of old monolith systems into more scalable open source web technologies. We we were under a lot of cost pressure then. So
and stuff that sounds common now. Well, to most of us, that sounds common now. Maybe not to many other large organizations, but back then, this is a whole new paradigm of thinking.
Yeah, think of an organization as big as AOL was back then, and we had thousands of servers. And the CTO of the organization looked at the cost of this and said, we just can't scale like this for you continuing to buy Red Hat or whatever. Mm-hmm. So let's go to CentOS. And we did it. And that was not my team, but it was others. But those were just incredible times. But we also had a bunch of engineers around the world. Eventually, I ended up being CTO of the AOL Media Group. It's like 230 engineers all around the world working on different products. I think we had 115 sites with just immense scale. And we were able to do it using open source technologies, essentially just the true LAMP stack, Linux-based stuff, Apache, and Java or JavaScript pages. So real simple stack. It worked at scale. And Tim, in that period of time, one set of management came in, one set of management went out. Tim Armstrong came in, started revamping the company, did totally the right thing, refocusing the company on a few smaller bets. But my team really took a hit in all that. And right about that same time, we got an offer to become part of a startup that probably is the best possible startup you could ever do because it's all well funded. Bloomberg was starting up a company called Bloomberg Government in the Washington, D.C. area. And they needed somebody to come in and run it and take the team that was an outsourced team that was working up in New York and bring it down to DC and build up an engineering staff. So did that.
So what was the premise of Bloomberg Government? Right?
It still exists today. In fact, as the Small World Department, I'll come back to that. I actually, the world comes back around. But so Bloomberg Government, the whole notion around it was to provide access to government information in a meaningful way. So government information is pretty much free. But it's hard to make use of because it's all different formats. It's not in any way normalized. And it's just, the volume of it is incredible.
Right.
So we set up a business where what we did is utilize Bloomberg technologies, which are pretty good at sucking in data, normalizing it, and then spitting it back out. But instead of using the traditional, quote, terminal interface that we're used to using, we used a web-based product instead.
Okay.
So it was built real quick.
And that's a big change for Bloomberg as well, because like the terminal is the core of everything that happens.
Still is. But yes, it was. It was an effort to really break off into ancillary businesses, and this was back in 2010. So I came in, did that, built a team. We took what was a monolith application, again, seems like a recurring theme, and broke it up into a service-based architecture with what we called services, now called microservices, depending on how you want to talk about it. Right. And scaled that thing out and built a team of about 40-some engineers up to run that. And then this story does come to an end at some point. We're getting there.
It's good.
Slowly but surely. And then
we're going to talk about transformation, and you're giving us a whole transformation journey right now, which is great.
Yeah, and then there's the person who was running what we call the media division in Bloomberg, Bloomberg.com. He was a co-founder of Splunk, and he had a very unique problem to deal with, and that was counting all his money. So he left.
It's a great problem.
He was a great guy, by the way. Totally deserved everything there. But we all should have that problem. But he left, and so they looked around and saw someone who has organizational experience with running media companies, and came to me. And I realized how much I actually kind of missed it at the time. So I went back up and ran that team for 6 years, Bloomberg.com, we rebuilt that stack from beginning to end, launched video at scale, all sorts of crazy stuff, and put a subscription business into play in 5 months.
Amazing. That quick. See, I gotta admire Bloomberg and like being able to make transitions and do things that fast. At the
There's never
size
like,
and scale that they are.
yep, and with crazy deadlines, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, we launched a subscription business in that amount of time. We also, during that time, built out an AI. There was an AI practice already going on there, but we really doubled down on it when others were not, or using outside services, and that was to their detriment. And it provides a competitive advantage to this day because we invested in that stuff. And that's a great thing about Bloomberg, is that they're willing to invest even in down markets like what's going on right now, because they know at some point it won't be, and that gives you a clear advantage. Anyhow,
they're going to be poised perfectly for the future. They're going to have the competitive advantage because they did make the investments now.
Yep. And so God bless Mike. That's an ethos he brought to the company from the very beginning. I guess at this point, 40 some years ago, when he started it. So the end of this story is that about a year and a half ago, I was approached to take over a division of the company that we acquired in 2010. It's a company that we bought that was called the Bureau of National Affairs, which sounds like a government entity, but it's not. It's a niche publishing organization that creates content centered around tax, legal, and government. And ironically, part of that government piece was that original piece that I started.
You were doing before. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So that's how the story comes back around. So anyhow, that's what I'm doing right now.
Really cool. Really cool.
So yeah, I just spent a half hour just talking about that.
No, I tell you, and you know what? I wanted to pry. We only have an hour, but I wanted to pry into much more. So let me see if I can weave it into some of the questions I got for you.
There you go.
The main goal of today's conversation with you, Eric, is, you know, when I asked you and you graciously accepted to do this with me, was we see a big challenge with enterprises still trying to become agile, and you know, you hear bullshit terms like Wagile out there and other forms. And one of the big things that most companies start to realize is not just up to the technology division or the digital division to become agile. And so in your journey, it doesn't even have to be Bloomberg, but as you started going from a more waterfall-based approach, what are some of the tactical things that you did that became very effective into moving organizations into an agile approach?
So I think the first thing that everybody needs to realize, you read about textbook Agile, and then there's real. Right. And the real is, don't expect to get there day one. There's just so many traditional habits, and maybe it's the industry that I've been in a lot, mostly the publishing industry, that you got to break through a lot of old habits. Best way to put it.
Old school thinking. I mean, people.
Just, you know, it worked, right? It was a world. Think about the world that you came from, non-digital. Mm-hmm. We were authoritative. We told you. We gave you the daily newspaper, or we gave you whatever, right?
Right.
You consumed it, and you were happy.
Right.
But the notion of consumer choice and consumer preference and competition, quite frankly, because you also were pretty much a monopoly.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a subscriber of one paper, then that's all you got. There was no real choice for you to see other.
Because the barriers to entry were high. Printing presses are not cheap.
Absolutely.
I knew the guy who did the project for the printing presses of the Washington Post. That was not cheap, and he took a big risk at the time. Unfortunately, he just recently passed away. But you know, these were not small things. You think about the company I'm working with now, Bloomberg. We're called Bloomberg Industry Group these days. They created publishing and information. Really, what it is information. But they created products centered around tax and legal, and the only way you do that is putting people on the ground and getting into the agencies as well as Capitol Hill, so that you can report on the things that others can't. It's capital intensive and that's human intensive. And so the barriers to entry were really high. And so where am I going with all this? So the barriers, you know, what are some of the things you're trading, especially when you come into organizations used to doing things in a certain way? There's an education process that has to occur. But the other thing, and you and I spoke about this many times in the past, but you know, as recently as a few days ago, the biggest challenge is there's got to be a will. If you are in an organization where you're in the engineering function and you don't have some support at the executive level, it's going to be tough.
Right.
I've been fortunate. For one, I have the support of the CEO of our organization, who's on board, if not an evangelist for doing things in a more agile and iterative way. When you think about the Bloomberg culture and the Bloomberg itself, it is the epitome of Agile before there was such a thing.
Of course.
A lot of the things they did.
Culture, and we'll talk a little bit about the Bloomberg culture because, in the times that I've worked with Bloomberg, it's going on 8 years. But like even 8 years ago, when you walk into Bloomberg's office, I mean, and we'll talk about some of the way you guys have set up your office, but even when you walk into the Bloomberg office, you're like, this is not what normal places work. Like, sure, it looks like a workplace I would work at because it looks very startup-y, but it's very transparent and open. But we'll get to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so there's all about that. And then the other thing that you got to get, there's a bunch of different cultures. One of the best pieces of advice I was ever given was, Agile without lean will never work. If you're trying to do Agile and you don't have a lean mindset, it's not going to work. You can have stand-ups. There's, and the other thing, I guess it's called doing Agile as opposed to being Agile, right? That's the phrase you hear a lot. I think those are some of the key things you got to look at. And also realize it's a slog. And it brings to mind, you're going to have some difficult conversations. And you just got to remember to try to not make it personal because it isn't. Don't take it too personally. I can remember as recently as a few months ago, I had one executive blowing up at me because I was questioning the way that they were doing their work that has been very successful. To that person's credit, she's absolutely right. They have been. But just because it has been in the past doesn't mean it will be in the future. And we needed to change.
The famous last words, we've always done it this way.
Yeah. And so it was an emotional outburst that just needed to get out. And now she's actually one of the biggest proponents of the change that's going on in the organization. So it's kind of funny how those things go around.
One of the tactical things you were talking about is education. And if you're not getting buy-in, then how do you suggest you even go about education and having a healthy debate with
first is you got
other members of your team or superiors that you need to get buy-in from?
So, what they say, that saying about old, too bad all the wisdom of being old is placed in all those people who are old. I wish I knew some of this stuff about 20 years ago. Right. But the reality is, look, the biggest piece of advice is if you see something, say something, right? Confront situations, but do it respectfully and also be empathetic to the other person's point of view. Understand where they're coming from and but you got to educate. And in the case of these, there's certain situations. In this particular one, what we told them is, look, I know what we're talking about, and I know talking about it's foreign to you, meaning the concept and even the idea. But let's go out, let's listen to our users, not too much, but to some extent, and let's come up with a hypothesis. Put down what we think the metrics are going to be for success, because that's the other thing.
Of course.
If you want to talk about agile transformation, people get lazy. Quite frankly, even I do. That's a big surprise. But you got to be not intellectually lazy. If you have an idea,
if you're smart and lazy, who cares? You're working smart.
You got to be able to willing to commit, and to commit means put your idea down on paper and talk about what means success, and more importantly, what doesn't. Right. Because nobody ever likes to admit they failed, and you got to get comfortable with failure. And failure is actually,
it's a good thing.
I'll take you down another road. There's a lot of great classes I've taken on Agile and product development. There's great books I can tell you about. The Margie Kagan book's probably the best one I've ever read. Okay. But there's all sorts of stuff, how to build great products. But the thing that was transformational for me was a class I took as part of an executive immersion process, and it was around sales. It was teaching the Sandler method. And there's many methods out there, but basically what they teach you is get comfortable with hearing no, because no is great. The worst possible place you can be is maybe.
Right. Yeah,
and so
sales is binary. You want a 0 or 1. You want a yes or a no.
Yeah. And so that was really transformational, and it also helped. How does that relate to Agile? Let me tell you how it relates to Agile. Agile and Lean is about having hypothesis, putting down metrics of success and failure, and doing it because knowing you're not going to be right, and getting comfortable with failure. And that's the hardest thing. You're going to fail, and actually failing is good because you know it's the wrong path. And then you can quickly switch or iterate to a better path. And that's the real hard one to teach. We're taught as engineers not to F up, right? At least.
Yeah.
And, you really have to set a new mindset that, it's okay to fail. Just don't get too good at it. But it's okay to fail. Just do it quick and then move on.
I'm so glad you said that. One of our biggest mantras at TribalScale that we put everywhere, actually I got stickers of it. Here's actually my laptop. I got a sticker right here of it. And it says fail fast.
There you go.
And it's okay to fail. And it's okay not to ask permission sometimes, obviously within certain boundaries, but go try something and go F up. And as part of our daily stand-up, we have a section called Fail Fast. Who F'd up yesterday and how did you F up, and teach everybody right then and there so we don't make the same mistake.
Yep. And, the challenge as leaders is to create that culture.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that are what we call anti-patterns, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to win, and winning means not losing. But sometimes losing is what gets you to winning.
Exactly. Well, the only way you become a winner is by learning from your losses, right? And if you're if you're the leader who's going to just go nuts every time somebody F's up, then your team's going to hide the mistakes that they're making. They're still happening.
Look, I can give you all sorts of metaphors about, but you learn more in things that don't go right than you do about things that do. And that's just a mindset change. So, just trying to think, I came into this organization. It was, think about every stereotype you've ever thought about of a company, that the way it approached development, waterfall, old fashioned, 2 years ago. And the first thing, I gave that speech pretty much. We're going to get lean. We're going to learn how to fail. And I could see the life. I still picture this when I addressed the team of about 100 and so folks, 200 folks or so. I still see those faces lighting up when I said that. Okay, we're going to learn to fail, and we're going to be okay with that.
We're all looking at each other like, is he serious right now?
And then the other thing is, and this is a metaphor for another thing, but I said, look, other thing we're going to do is we're going to stop trying to run infrastructure here. We're going to try to make use of cloud services wherever we can.
Right.
And it's not because, hey, I want to make somebody in the cloud provider rich. It's because we got to focus on what's the best use of our resources. And the best way to use our resource is going to be applying as much as we can to product development that actually reach end users. And it doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of all infrastructure people, because that's crazy too.
Yeah.
But we're also going to transform how we do things, and we're going to try to do as much as we can through code.
And so just on that, you faced a challenge there, because I'm sure there was somebody who's titled head of infrastructure who was just like,
that worked out real well.
Shut the F up. Like, what are you talking about? Right. So you had a challenge within your own organization when you brought that thought. And we see this all the time. I mean, every majority of the Fortune 500 organizations we work with, it's the exact same thing. There is somebody there who's going to throw a big fit because you're encroaching on, let's say, some sort of turf or or what they feel is their domain, and they have a hard opinion as to how it should be done.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and kid you and tell you no, there weren't any issues, but I'll tell you, the team that I was really worried about the most was a layer down from them. The people who were in charge of the whole VMware infrastructure and automation that they did in Puppet, all that stuff, because they were really bought into that stuff. And that, quite frankly, in that model, they were very sophisticated, and they ended up being my biggest allies. They saw the value of what we were going to do and the chance to learn new things. So they were true engineers. True engineers want to learn new shit.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and continue to prove that they're good engineers no matter the platform.
Right.
So these guys just hook, line, and sinker embraced it, created a platform, and have created an infrastructure that has really started to allow our developers to to accelerate the way that they do things. And the other thing, from a developer standpoint, you need to care about the whole ecosystem now. You're not just here. You're not a short order cook.
Right.
If you want that, go somewhere else, right? As a developer, you're now an engineer. An engineer means,
and it matters. So now it matters end to end for you, right? Like
yep.
Everything.
You have responsibility.
You got responsibility. Yeah.
You don't throw things over to a QA team. You own it. How the infrastructure works, you own it. When a problem comes in, you're first person who gets it, and you triage it and send it to the right group. And then you also own the business aspect of what you're developing and understanding why you're doing it. And you also owe responsibility to the team to be a participant in how that's being and what's being done, and have an opinion, and understand what the customer need is. And that's where we're trying to go, and we're making it. It's I see green shoots everywhere.
That's awesome.
And that's the fun. This is the fun part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the hard part is starting, and once
Yes.
we've had a couple episodes, and everyone says, "Hey, don't go and try to boil the ocean." And you kind of said that in the beginning also. Go start doing small things or small tasks and start this culture of winning. And when everybody then wants to be on the winning team, and it'll start going towards that end goal, especially when it's customer centric, especially when you got KPIs that matter to everybody there. So if you buy in on the right endpoint, then how you get there starts becoming these little baby steps you could take.
So you just also touched on another important point, which we're struggling with, quite honestly, right now. KPIs, measurement. So first, there's the whole, as I talked about earlier, getting people to realize you actually have to do it. Then the next thing is, it's kind of the dog catching the car. Can you do it?
Right.
And what we're finding is, well, we're not as well instrumented as we should be. And that's another thing that we're starting to teach our engineers, is that you have a responsibility, and the product people as well, to make sure that we instrument things. It's not somebody else's responsibility. And as an engineer, you need to be intellectually curious and think about, what is it that I'm going to build, and how am I going to measure it? Make sure I have the proper tagging in place, to make sure that happens. That whatever tagging software,
whatever tagging software, it could be more than that. It could be test coverage within your code base. It could be a whole bunch of things.
But it's all those fun things. These are the next set of problems. But yes, it's teaching that whole mindset across the board. So there's many aspects to this change, and at some level it never really ends. But it's gratifying as you see pieces of it turn up. So for instance, we have this one business that produces fixed asset software that people use as a software as a service. And a year ago, actually not even a year ago, I hate to admit it, 6 months ago, they couldn't deploy more than once a month. And even that was it was like the daily miracle when it did occur. It required a weekend of rolling out, testing, all manual.
Just a question there. How often do you guys deploy?
Depends on which part of my business. I can tell
you.
What's
the quickest?
So quickest is matter of minutes. But the goal is, I want anybody to be able to deploy as often as they want.
As often they can. Yeah. Excellent.
And there's the obvious reason why, right? Smaller changes, more often, less change sets, more reliable software. It's hard to get people used to that concept, but I've seen it now many times. It works. You get a higher quality. But we were deploying that once a month, and that was crazy. So it took us 8 months to automate it to a place where we felt and get the proper test coverage. There's many elements. There's automation. There's test coverage. Now, what used to take an entire weekend now takes, and we're not done yet. Now takes less than an hour to do.
Excellent.
And so, those are the great things you can look back on. You're making a difference. And now we deploy multiple times a month. And the gating factor isn't technology. It's quite frankly the product team and the customers, getting them used to it.
Right. All right. I'm going to switch it up a bit. I'm going to switch it
Sure.
up a bit. I do this. I've been starting to do this in the last couple of episodes, but I want people to get to know you. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that just come off the top of my head. And I want you, quick answers. All right. So here we go. You ready?
Yep.
What would you do if you won the lottery?
You know, the natural reaction is nothing, but I don't think that could ever be the case. I won the lottery. You know, there's some ideas around philanthropy I actually would love to try to apply technology to. And the beauty, I'm almost sounding like a poster boy here, but in the company we work in, philanthropic efforts, that word I'm trying to say, is really valued. But there's a couple of there's a lot of places where technology is not being utilized to where it should. I think philanthropic efforts is one of them. You know, healthcare is another obvious one, although you know, we're making inroads there. I'd probably do that. That's probably where I would focus on, something that can make a meaningful difference. Because, you know, when it's all said and done, this stuff's all great, but nobody's going to care 100 years from now about this stuff that I did. Now, I'd love to make some sort of difference in the world, positive as opposed to negative.
Well, what's your favorite hobby?
So favorite hobbies are, the physical fitness is a big thing for me, not because I want to look like Atlas or live forever, but it's a great way of clearing my mind.
Okay.
As I get older, I'm going to have to evolve that. So hobbies are like
what are you doing?
biking.
What are you doing in physical fitness?
So these days, biking is the big thing. Hiking. Kind of found, especially with this COVID thing, I'm fortunate to live near some pretty decent trails. I've discovered a lot of stuff near my house I didn't know existed. So that's kind of fun. Other things I like to play. I used to work on cars when I was younger, back when you could. I've kind of rediscovered that too. Sometimes
knowing you're probably going to go play with it and it becomes autonomous all of a sudden, but sure.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not that smart. And then another passion I have is music, and I'm trying to learn how to play bass. So those are my hobbies.
And I want to give a big shout out to your favorite local spot. What is the first spot you want to go to dinner with your family and friends as soon as this lockdown ends?
So I guess probably Liberty Tavern.
Okay, where is that?
That's located in Arlington in the Clarendon section. It's a pretty nice place, right in the middle of the bustling area there. So it's kind of cool, and it's got really good food.
Love it. All right, Eric, let's chat a little bit about, we touched on this earlier, but let's chat a little bit about how Bloomberg set up its offices. You know, I've been fortunate enough to visit your New York office, your London office. Both got a very similar type buzz, energy, feel. Talk about some of the things, the thought process that went into setting up an office that way, and some of the theories behind why it was set up that way was actually because of the digital transformation that you were going through and the metrics that that Bloomberg is really keen on making sure are hit.
So I think a lot of this, and Mike says it far more eloquently than I ever will, but it comes from his core principles when he set the company up. It's about transparency and collaboration. And so the notion was that, number one, there are no offices. And when he went off to be mayor, some offices kind of snuck in. And when he came back, he came through like a sledgehammer, got rid of all of them. And that includes him.
Yeah. Well, he has this big glass thing in the middle where he just sits, like it's on the main floor, right? Or that's like his little boardroom.
Well, he was, when he came back, he's over on the east side of the building, in the Lexington Avenue side. But yeah, he's pretty much out in the open. Now let's just say, you know, and that allows for quick collaboration. You can lean over, talk to folks, and gather anybody he needs up there. I've been called up there once or twice in my time when I was in the New York office. Quickly explain something. And so it just quick conversations, quickly get things done. That's the notion behind it. Now, look, there are some things that are challenging too, in that to make that culture effective, most people need to be there, right? And that sort of prevents remote work, and that's kind of an anti-pattern of some other sorts. But the open area is when you first come into all of our offices, all of our larger offices, you come into an open area where the pantry is, where there's food, drink, and everything else. And the notion there is they want you to mix with people and have spontaneous conversations.
It's the collisions, right? It's the hey, yep. I just bumped into so-and-so from this other department, and now I understand what they do.
Yep. Well, and then not even that. It's like, hey, I've been meaning to get you, and I just bumped into you. Yeah. So let's have this conversation now. And it's a very serendipitous atmosphere. So it happens all the time. And then the other is, even within the building itself, the elevators don't stop at all floors. And that's on purpose. Right. Well, one is because we had so many people to move in and out because of the density, but two, they want you to mingle with people. So there's certain floors you can get off on, and by definition, you're going to have to go through one or two floors to get down to where you are, yep. or up, unless you happen to be lucky and be on that floor. Yep. So, all those things are designed to promote mixing. Our work layouts, we work in an open space, may not work out so well right now. And it's actually one of the challenges as we think about how we're going to return, and we're all side by side for the most part. There's different configurations we've been playing with, but for the most part, we're all side by side about 4 feet apart.
About 5 feet apart, yeah.
Yeah. And very fancy, but what they're emulating is like it's very expensive sawhorse tables in a sense. But they're very nice looking white desks, and they have file drawers and all that, but you don't have too much stuff. Yep. And yeah, you need to have a conference with somebody, you go in a conference room, and you have to book those things. And then it's kind of interesting about transparency about that. There's very few reserved rooms in the whole office. Right. And usually they're for HR or things like that. Right. So everybody has a right to go to every room. And the other thing is, the way that it works there is if you book a room and you're not there within 10 minutes, gone.
Gone, free for all.
and whoever gets there first gets it. Yeah. So yeah. So those are
one of the coolest things I noticed when I was there is I saw this ticker up there, and I was walking with OK Okaro, and I was with OK, and I was like, hey, what is that ticker? And he goes, that shows you how many terminals we have installed right now, and are we up or down for the day? So if we're down for the day, we all know, hey, something's going wrong. We all got to work to make sure those terminal installs go up. I thought that was super cool, that it was just so transparent from everybody.
Yeah, that's part of the whole transparency. There's a function on the terminal you can run to see where they are at any given time on the sales process. And we even had more, unfortunately, that London whale incident made us have to scale that back a little bit. Sure. Yeah, you can get a whole bunch of information. Our calendars are open to each other. Right. You can make certain events private, but the notion is that you can see who's doing what.
Right.
It makes it a whole lot easier, and you don't appreciate some of that stuff until you're not dealing with that.
Sure. And so moving forward, how is the demand for Bloomberg? Is it positioned as a lot of these awesome software companies that we're seeing, where demand is actually going up?
I think we're more valuable to our customers than ever in the core products, and we're seeing that. And hopefully this doesn't last too much longer, but we're in a pretty good place for right now. There's certain segments of our business that are suffering, just like the general economy scale at large is. But we're fortunate that we think about things in the long term, never the short term.
Right.
I said earlier, we look at these as opportunities to hire good people, because quite frankly, a lot of good people are getting displaced. We have job openings, by the way, so please go to.
Please apply. There's a record.
Please apply. We're always looking for good engineers.
Please apply.
At all our locations. So we tend to we like to invest in these types of times.
Perfect. Perfect. Eric, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Once again, this First Name Basis podcast is available on, let me get this right, Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, name the place, that's where it is. But thanks, Eric, again for joining us today. I appreciate your time. Lots of insights, and please do come back. We'll do it after this pandemic.
All right, thanks.